I'm the Awkward GM Corbin, and you might be asking yourself, how do I get started planning a campaign? And this is going to be just a sort of an overview of my own process. I'd like to thank my patron Echo. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. The first thing that we have here is the pitch. This is what I gave to my players to pitch them on the campaign, hence the name pitch. It's essentially your mission statement. It tells your players what they should be expecting in the game. Also, I don't really adhere to the pitch strictly. Sometimes I make adjustments based on what my players tell me they want, and I try to accommodate for that. The main thing I wanted to get across in this pitch was that my players are going to be rebuilding this community, and that's going to be the main focus of the story. What I mean by main story is that this is going to be the main plot that the players are going to be focusing on. They're going to have their own side plots and other plots that come up, but this is going to be the main focus unless I lose track and I decide that that main plot doesn't really work with how the players are playing. Now let me introduce you to my player characters as we scroll down here to the pack section of the document. If you're not playing Werewolf the Forsaken, you might call this the party section, especially if you're playing Dungeons & Dragons, where a party is what you call a group of players. I did make a little bit of a mistake here, and that is Fletch is actually not a player character. Fletch is actually an NPC. So I'm going to mark an NPC section here just so that we all know that Fletch is not run by a player. So I have two players who already gave me their character names and their description for their character. I also have possibly two other players depending on if scheduling works out, which is why I've put TBD here for the moment. Going forward, this section is actually going to be part of how I take notes. I'm going to put all the notes I have about player characters and what their goals are here so I can keep track of what the players are planning to do and see what they might want to do in the future. Specifically for Werewolf the Forsaken, each one of the tribes that a player can join has a specific type of prey that they like to hunt. So I just have it called out here so that I know for when I build antagonists which monsters the players may want to face. Next up, we have the current events section, which is just my note about the first session these players have played. Now, they did play a one-shot a long time ago, but I wanted to continue on the story, so I'm letting them respec their characters, redo their backstories and such, because the one-shot was only about 2 to 3 hours, and they might have figured out, hey, I didn't like how this character played, and I might want to play a new one, and it's been over a year now, I think, so that's probably very likely for them to want to do. I know for a fact that one of my players created their werewolf without any brawl skill, which made them feel very underwhelming in combat because when you go into these werewolf forms, you're only using unarmed attacks, you're not using any weapons typically, so he felt very underwhelming compared to everyone else, so he might want to respec his character. Respec being a vocab word that is essentially changing what your character can do or changing your character's backstory. I do have one player who doesn't really remember what their character's backstory was when we ran this session, so they might want to change up their backstory to be something they're more interested in the moment now. Originally, the idea for this Werewolf the Forsaken one-shot was just to get my Changeling the Lost players, my newer players in that game, more familiar with how the system worked and to feel more comfortable role-playing. And now, since the Changeling the Lost game has finished, I want to try and get them back into Werewolf the Forsaken. And it's been months since that Changeling the Lost game ended, so this current events section is just going to be where I'm going to keep a synopsis, like a very short synopsis of what my players did each session, just so that I can remember what's happening. I'm probably going to keep the notes for each sessions in a separate Word document from each other just so that I have them more organized, but this is where I'll have like the broad strokes of the story planned out, and if I need to refer back to one of my previous sessions and those specific notes, I'll have those Word documents to go back to if I need to. Now we have the bread and butter of the campaign notes that I have here. These are going to be essentially the main plot points that I'm going to be focusing on. The number one main plot points I always focus on are going to be the player character backstories, and those I don't have listed here yet because the players haven't given them to me yet. I'm going to ask which NPCs that they might have in their backstory, what goals they might have for themselves, and that's going to sort of dictate what these plot points are. We're having a session 0 soon, and once that happens, this is going to be more filled out. Then we have the community building section of the game, and this was the main focus I have in the pitch of this campaign. And for right now, this is just a list of different features of the town that they might interact with. I have a section or a video that I'm going to do on the map that I've created for this campaign, and that's going to go into a little bit more detail about what's going on here. So I'm not going to focus on this much. These locations will have like some NPCs associated with them, but they're also going to have residents associated with them, which is a wholly Werewolf the Forsaken concept, or at least Chronicles of Darkness concept, for spirits specifically, because spirits congregate where resonance that resonates with them is strongest. So if you have a sport spirit, it's going to hang out near a sporting field. And I said sporting field, which makes you know that I am not into sports. Additionally, I have a few locations that I've fleshed out a little bit more. For instance, the blood bank has vampires in it, though I haven't figured out exactly what they're doing over there yet. I have a 1950s general store, which has some sort of time travel plot point to it. As the players interact with it, the story will unfold, and depending on how they interact with it is how I'll progress the story with it. If they just want to like have that plot point figured out and be done with, I'll let them do that. But if they want to sort of like interact with it and have fun with it, I'm going to let them do that as well. Additionally, I have a bunch of side plots listed here, and if you look over here on the left, you're going to see that I have spirit politics, god machine related encounters and plot points. I even have pictures, and you might have seen them earlier, that I've sort of just grabbed from online. I'm not planning to sell these pictures at all. These are pictures that someone else did, but they invoke what I like in my campaign, so I've put them in here. I've fleshed out a few characters here, like since my setting is in Dedham, which is near Boston, there's the Charles River, and the Charles River sort of like goes through every section of Boston at some point, and even through Dedham at one point. So I have this spirit that is sort of like the city spirit, the spirit that sort of personifies Boston and a bit of Dedham as well, and that is going to be Charles, which is going to be this water serpent. Now, I do have here underneath it a list of aspirations, two short term, one long term. I haven't figured out its short terms and long terms yet, though I'm getting very close to figuring those out. Additionally, I've thrown in a few images that might be for spirits that they'll interact with eventually. I have no idea what these, the brood of the river are going to be, but I feel like they are closely associated with Charles. But basically, if my players are like, are there any spirits by the river? I can just say, oh yeah, these guys are here and they look kind of creepy. Additionally, I have the brood of joyful addicts, which is probably going to be the first brood that my players are going to encounter, as they are these joy spirits that are feeding off of people who are drug addicts in the town. And the way that they're doing it is that there is a claimed joy spirit who has possessed someone so much that the spirit and the person have sort of merged together into this powerful monster creature. So this joy claimed entity is essentially giving out these pills that it creates, these happy pills that create this resonance of joy and addiction, and it allows these spirits to have a little bit more of a foothold in the town, and it also causes a lot of problems for the residents of the town, as suddenly there are a lot more of these drug addicts in the town. I've baked into the backstory of a bunch of these spirit broods different sort of conflicts that they have with one another, just so that my players aren't having this issue of each spirit brood feels separate from one another. For instance, there's a brood of slanted justice, and what they are all about is that they hang out by the courthouses and the police stations, but they are slowly being pushed out by these spirits of corruption that have sort of infiltrated these sections of the city, or of the town. Additionally, I have a couple of examples of the brood of depression. These are these depression spirits that exist within the town. They're having problems with the joy spirits because they don't like it when people are happy. They like it when people are sad and depressed. So they are at odds with the joyful addicts brood. Oh, by the way, if you're looking for some artwork that really helps exemplify spirits, this treasure chest creature that we have here is actually from a Super Sentai concept art, or as it's known in the West, Power Rangers. So Power Rangers concept art, really good, really fun to use sometimes for monsters. Additionally, I try and grab some creepy stuff from online. The laughing woman character that I have here, who's acclaimed, her pictures from a Japanese comedy action movie. It's from the movie version, but there is a manga. This porcelain woman that I found, I just sort of found it online in these interesting art projects that people put on Pinterest, so that can help as well. And here's where I was talking to someone online, and they had mentioned that at the movie theater, in the Legacy Place movie theater in Dedham, there's this code word that they use whenever there's a fire present, which is sort of like Mr. Strife is in Theater 1 or whatever. And that's so that they don't have their customers get upset or start to panic when a fire has happened. They try and keep it quiet, and they use a fire extinguisher and take it out. Now, so I took this concept and I turned it into Mr. Strife as this sort of urban legend type character that exists within the movie theater. Now, it's a bit human, so maybe it's not acclaimed and maybe it's not a spirit, but I don't know. I'm going to play around with it and see what I can do with it. The image is from, I believe, a DC or Marvel comic book supervillain, so it's something I can't use in a stream or something, but it's something I can use for right now. So I want to touch a little bit on the hosts here, just to give you a little sense of how it is to create your own host splat or your host type. I was on the Werewolf the Forsaken server. It's either the Onyx Path server or the Chronicles of Darkness server from Codex of Darkness, and I was talking to one of the developers from Werewolf the Forsaken, and they told me that when they created the names for the rat hosts and for the spider hosts in Werewolf the Forsaken, what they did was they took a Sumerian word that was similar or represented the type of character or animal that what the spirit host was, and then they sort of rejiggered the name a little bit and then added the endfix, whatever the suffix of LU to the end of that word, and that basically LU is essentially what you would use to say that there was a swarm. It's Beshalu, which means rat swarm. Specifically for the fox hosts, when I wanted to come up with a name for them, I looked up an ancient Sumerian word that sort of matched with what a fox is, which is sort of a cunning animal, and I think I found one in this specific dictionary that said Ka means cunning or talking or mouth, and so I felt that sort of matched with the fox aspect. So I originally used Ka, and then it was Kalu, and that didn't have a ring to it. It was too short. It didn't sound like an ancient name as much. So I went Ka'alu, and it sounds a little bit better for this first tongue werewolf language. And the developer really helped me, and I thank him a lot for that, or thank them a lot. It really helped me out. The picture that I'm currently using is just a placeholder. What I really wanted was a picture of 3 foxes in a trench coat, but you can't really just find that online. And I just sort of like this idea that the hosts, which are sort of these infestations that take place in a human body, are just sort of stacked on top of each other in a trench coat, sort of like how this Beshalu here looks like. It's a trench coat, and it's just got a lot of rats in it. Down here is where I talk about the Protectorate and the Forsaken tribes and the Pure tribes. I just want to have sort of like some meeting places that the players could go to if they want to talk to their tribal leaders. That doesn't usually happen a lot in the Werewolf of the Forsaken games, but I'm giving it to my players as an option in case they want to discuss things with some more veteran werewolves. I do have a little description here about the Protectorate, which is the overall government of the area, though technically because they're in Dedham, which is outside of Boston, they're not under the purview of the Protectorate, and that's going to be a little bit of a political issue that's going to be brought up in the game. I'm not sure where it's going to land, if they side with the Protectorate or if they decide to create their own sort of like mini separate Protectorate out in Dedham. That's up to them. I'm not forcing anything on them. Additionally, here we have the Ivory Claws, the Pure tribes, which are more the antagonistic tribes. I have a few descriptions here of what they're doing currently. I also have a few characters here that I've sort of added to their pack. Like, this is going to be the main pack that they interact with. I don't know who these characters are. I just sort of came up with names. I have short-term and long-term goals listed underneath them, but for the moment they're just sort of like these blank slates that I can apply some sort of motivations to later if I come up with them, either in-game or out of game. Additionally, I've got the Children of the Flame, which are a more set up pack that exists of fire-touched pure wolves. They have a bit more to them. I have a little bit more about what their pack is currently doing in the town. But I don't have any names for the characters. I just found some artwork here that seems to match with my inkling of what these Children of the Flame should look like. And have them as placeholders, and if my players need to talk to anyone from them, I'll randomly generate a name for a character and slap it on to the artwork that I think matches that character better. And as I scroll down here, you get some cool werewolf art because the Predator Kings are not able to wear clothes in the traditional sense. They have to make their own, hand make their own clothes out of leather, usually from creatures that they've killed. So because they have this thing where they can't use any objects that were created by mortal hands, and that extends to basically everything, which kind of makes them pretty hard to represent using artwork that is not from Werewolf the Forsaken. But for the moment, I'm just using werewolf art because werewolf art works for any of the werewolf tribes, no matter what. So long as it doesn't look too forsaken, it can be a pure werewolf, no matter what. Additionally, here I have other supernatural creatures. I have vampires, which I didn't mention it earlier, but my players in the one-shot killed a vampire. So these are the vampires who are part of the coterie that vampire was a part of, and they really want to have revenge on the players for killing their friend. Additionally, I have to be determines for a bunch of other groups. I have fleshed out some hunters in the area. I've got a beast character that is going to sort of be off to the side in case my players want to fight it. And I have a few characters here for Deva Corp, which is a God Machine entity, or God Machine cult. I don't know what it's doing there, but I'm going to flesh it out a little bit more. I'm always going to be fleshing out this stuff as I go. Nothing's set in stone. If my players decide they want to... None of this stuff is set in stone. At least it's not set in stone until I present it to the player, in which case it becomes a little bit more difficult to manage. For instance, if I have an NPC who's really interested in trying to take over the police station, and suddenly I decide, well, actually he doesn't want to take over the police station, he wants to take over this pizzeria, it doesn't make sense, it doesn't track, so I have to maintain that continuity to some extent. So that's how I plan for my campaigns. Please let me know what you do. I genuinely am curious to see what people do to plan these things out. I know everyone has a different way of doing things, and I'd love to sort of like reiterate and better my own design. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a good one, and there's probably an AI generated thing over this way because this is where the empty space is right now. This is the best picked video for you based on YouTube's algorithm, which usually just picks like the last video, I think. Please let me know if it's not the last video.